Hey, what's up everybody? 8-Bit Flashback here. Today I'll be demonstrating how to set up the Sega Tower of Power with the HD Retrovision component cables. And I will also show some audio and video comparisons between the High Definition Graphics Model 1 and the non-High Definition Graphics Model 1 when used with the Sega Tower of Power setup. So when hooking up the different variants of the Model 1 with the Tower of Power, I like to use different methods to get the best audio out of my Tower of Power setup. Not all Sega Genesis Model 1s are created equal. Some have great sound and others not so much. Now let's take a look at all the different components I'll be using for my Sega Tower of Power setup. This is the Sega 32X. It does plug into the cartridge slot of the Sega Genesis. And on the back, it has a couple different connections as a power input, an AV input, and an AV output. And here is the Sega CD Model 1. The Sega Genesis plugs into the Sega CD via this expansion port located on the side. And located on the back is a couple more connections. We have the power input, the mix and jack, and the audio out. And I will be going over these connections in this video. Here is the High Definition Graphics Model 1. This one does feature the better sound quality. On the back, it also has an external port, and you can use this to identify that it does have the better sound quality. And there is some other methods out there to identify which Model 1s have the better sound quality, but I'm not going to cover that in this video. And here's another variant of the Model 1. This one does not have very good sound quality, and it does not feature the High Definition Graphics logo or the external port on the back. To hook up the Tower of Power to my TV, I am using the HD Retrovision component cables. These use the native 240p RGB signal from the Genesis and display it on your TV. But your TV does have to support a 240p component signal in order for these cables to work. And as you can see here, these cables do have an audio input jack, and these allow you to connect the stereo from the front of the Genesis Model 1. For power, I'm using this power supply I got from Retro Games Supply. This is a 3-in-1 power supply that makes hooking up my Tower of Power so much easier. But if you want, you could stick with the original 3 power supplies to get the full effect of the monstrosity that is the Tower of Power. Okay, now it's time to start assembling everything together. So I'll grab my Sega CD Model 1 and my Sega Genesis with the high definition graphics with the better sound quality. And I'll flip that over, and there's going to be a cover on the side right here. And this will expose the expansion port that plugs into the Sega CD. And this one also has a red cover that protects the end of the expansion port that has to be removed as well. Now at this point, you could hook up the brackets that secure your Sega Genesis to the Sega CD, but I'm gonna skip that step. But if you're not a responsible adult and you plan on skateboarding at the same time you're playing your Sega Tower of Power, you should probably use the bracket. Now it's time to plug my Sega Genesis into the Sega CD. So you just have to line it up straight, then slide it to the right, and it should plug right in. Now I'll grab my 32X and plug that into the Genesis cartridge slot right here. And it'd be nice if it was just this easy, but we still have quite a bit of work to do. So I'm going to flip it around, then grab my 32X patch cable. This is just a generic cable I got on eBay for like 15 bucks, but the official cable should work just fine as well. So this cable has 2 male ends. One end of this will plug into the Genesis Model 1, and the other end will plug into the AV input on the Sega 32X. And here is something I would like to mention. So when you use a standard patch cable such as this one, the sound will be muted when using the HD Retrovision cables. To get the proper sound, the stereo output from the front of the Genesis will have to be connected, and I'll show that here in just a few. Now it's time to hook up my HD Retrovision cables. And these do have a nice arrow that indicates which side is the top on the plug, and this will plug into the AV out on the Sega 32X. Now I'll grab my 3-in-1 power supply. So this has 3 different tips on the end of the power supply cord. and these will plug into the Sega 32X, Sega CD, and the Sega Genesis. And the company that I bought this power supply from has all kinds of different power supplies for various different consoles, including different models of the Sega Genesis. Next, I will grab my audio patch cable. This is a double male cord with 3.5mm stereo audio jacks on each end, and this should be about 1.5 to 2 feet long. So one end of this cord will plug into the HD Retrovision cables right here, and the other end will plug into the front of the Genesis console, located right here. So this is the stereo output jack on the Sega Genesis Model 1. And because this is the Sega Genesis model with the better sound output, you can go ahead and turn the volume all the way up. So now all of my connections have been made for my Sega Tower of Power, and all that's left to do is plug it in and connect to my TV. And just to let you know, there is multiple different 32X patch cables out there available with an audio cord already attached, but they may or may not be compatible with the HD Retrovision cables. So the safest bet is to just use a separate audio patch cable. And now I'm going to show a little bit of gameplay footage from the game Troubleshooter using this Tower of Power setup. And here's an up-close look at the difference between using composite cables versus the HD Retrovision cables. On the left would be the HD Retrovision cables, and on the right would be the composite cables. Now it's time to grab my non-high definition graphics Model 1 that has the lesser audio quality and start assembling my Tower of Power together. So the first step is to plug my Sega Genesis into the Sega CD, then plug in my Sega 32X into the Genesis cartridge slot, then start making my connections. Here is my 32X patch cable. So we got one end that's bigger that plugs into the Sega Genesis, and the other end that's smaller plugs into the 32X on the AV in port. Now I'm going to grab my HD Retrovision cables and get those plugged in. So this plugs into the AV out port on the Sega 32X. And here's where it starts to get a little different than the previous Tower of Power setup. This is a male 3.5mm audio jack to male RCA stereo splitter. The purpose of this splitter is to connect my Sega CD audio to my Retrovision cables. So these red and white RCA audio plugs plug into the back of my Sega CD right here. So the white one plugs into the white port, and the red one plugs into the red port. Here's a closer look. We have a left and right, marked red and white. And then the other end of the splitter plugs into the Retrovision cables where the 3.5mm audio jack is located. So this links the Sega CD audio with the Retrovision cables. Now it's time to link the Sega Genesis audio with the Sega CD. So right here, I'm using the same audio patch cable. This has the 3.5mm male ends on both ends of the cable. This end will plug into the back of the Sega CD where it's labeled Mixer. And the other end will plug into the front of the Sega Genesis where the headphone jack is located. And because the audio is not as good on this console, I would recommend only turning the volume up to about 90%. Otherwise, the sound distortion gets pretty bad. Now it's time to plug in the power, and I'm using this same 3-in-1 power supply. So I'm going to plug it into the 32X, the Sega Genesis, and the Sega CD. So now all my connections are done. The goal with this particular setup, with the Tower of Power and the non-high definition graphics Genesis Model 1, is to route the sound through the Sega CD. The Sega CD has superior audio sound when compared to this Genesis Model 1's audio. This will allow the Sega CD games that support CD audio to have a much cleaner sound. But unfortunately, it doesn't help the audio for the Genesis or the 32X. This only improves the Sega CD audio. And here's a test with this setup. What's interesting about the Sega CD games is most of the games have audio that can be routed directly out of the Sega CD, but some Sega CD games route the audio through the Genesis only. And to make things even weirder, the Sega CD BIOS sound is actually split between the Sega CD and the Genesis. And here's an example of the sound of the Sega CD BIOS being split between the Genesis and the Sega CD. So as you can hear right there, the sound is being split, but once this game actually starts, all the sound is being routed out the back of the Sega CD, and the sound can no longer be controlled by the volume switch on the Genesis. So as you can hear there, the sound with this Sega CD game is pretty clean when using this setup. But if we hook this up the same way we did the first Tower of Power in this video, the sound from the Sega CD is not so good. And here's an example showing just that. So as you could hear there, the sound quality was not so good, and you could hear quite a bit of distortion. So that's the reason that I like to hook up the Sega Genesis Model 1 with the bad audio quality through the Sega CD. And here's another example of using the second Tower of Power method with the non-high definition graphics Model 1. Now when it comes to the first Tower of Power setup with the high definition graphics Model 1, it's not such a big issue. The audio is pretty close to being the same, whether it's routed out the Genesis or out the Sega CD. But I would give a slight edge to running the audio out the Genesis, as I showed with the first setup on the Tower of Power. And here's another example of running the CD audio through the non-high def Genesis. And here's an example of using the second Tower of Power setup with the non-high definition graphics Model 1. And here's an example with using the first Tower of Power setup in this video with the high definition graphics Model 1. So as you can hear in those examples, it's best to run the audio from the Sega Genesis with the bad audio quality through the Sega CD, just like I showed in the second method for the Tower of Power setup. But if you have the high definition graphics Model 1, you can run the audio from the Sega CD through the Sega Genesis, as I showed in the first method for the Tower of Power setup. When it comes to the Sega 32X, the sound automatically routes through the Sega Genesis, so the sound quality will be dependent on the version of your Sega Genesis Model 1. If it's the high definition graphics Model 1, it'll sound great, but if it's the non-high definition model, it won't sound very good. And of course, the same goes for the Sega Genesis games. And with all that being said, I don't want to confuse you, but there is a couple of variants of the Model 1s and Model 2s that have better sound output that don't have the high definition graphics logo. But finding these consoles is far and few between, and identifying them can be somewhat tricky. This game footage right here is a Sega 32X game called X-Men Mind Games, which is a prototype game. And I'm playing this using the first Sega Tower of Power method with the high definition graphics Model 1. Here's another Sega 32X game This is called Virtua Hamster, and this is also a prototype. In this first example, I'll be using the second tower of power method with the non-high def Model 1. And in the second example, I'll be using the first tower of power method with the high def Model 1. And here is the Revenge of Shinobi on the Sega CD. And this is one of those games where the audio only routes through the Sega Genesis. With this game footage, I am using the first tower of power method with the high def Model 1. Okay, it's time for me to go. If you liked this video, if you could hit that like button and subscribe. And have yourself a great day, and I'll see you next time. Oh, and I almost forgot, for my next Sega Genesis video, I'll be talking about the TMSS, the trademark security system for the Sega Genesis. It'll be interesting, I promise.